In a world where filters are everywhere, on our photos, our words, even our personalities, there's something magnetic about someone who shows up real. Think about it. We're constantly told to polish ourselves, perfect the image, smooth out the edges, make it all look effortless. But here's a question worth asking. What if what truly makes us unforgettable isn't our perfection, but our honesty? Carl Jung, the master of understanding the human psyche, once said we're not drawn to flawless people, we're drawn to the ones who feel authentic. And the traits that make someone truly unforgettable? They're usually the ones we've been taught to tone down, hide, or flat out ignore. But here's the twist. Those are the exact parts of you the world needs to see. We spend so much time focused on the surface, our appearance, how we speak, the image we project. But the real power? It's under the surface. It's that calm energy, that unshakable presence, that grounded, quiet strength that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. Being unforgettable isn't about being the flashiest or the most talked about. It's about being the one people still feel long after you've walked out of the room. And the Stoics? They knew this. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to impress anyone. He wrote to understand himself. Epictetus didn't perform for attention. He spent his life mastering his inner world. That's the real flex. In today's world, the real power is owning your truth so fully that you stop needing anyone else to validate it. So, if you've ever felt like you were too much or not enough, if you felt overlooked, no matter how much you give, then you're not alone. This video is here to flip that narrative. We're diving into 7 paradoxical traits that make someone truly unforgettable, not by strategy, not by charm, but by being so rooted in who you are that no one can copy it. No one can replace it. If that message speaks to something real inside you, if it challenges you or gives you peace, then consider this your space. And hey, if you're new here and you're feeling this message already, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button. That's how we grow this space together, with truth, depth, and absolutely no filters. Let's get into it. Let's be real. Most of us are performing every single day, even when we don't know it. We're not on a stage, but we're still acting. Editing our emotions like we edit our photos. Smiling for the world while feeling tired, overwhelmed, or unseen on the inside. We say, "I'm fine," because explaining the truth feels like too much work. We've done it so long, it's become second nature. But here's the danger. The longer you perform, the easier it is to forget who you actually are beneath the mask. You start trading authenticity for approval. And after a while, that approval stops feeling like enough. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But how do you get to know yourself when you've spent years becoming who the world told you to be? This isn't just about social media. This is deeper. It's the way we downplay our opinions so we don't rock the boat. It's the way we dim our excitement so we don't seem too much. It's the way we quietly step out of the spotlight so others can feel more comfortable. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that being fully ourselves was a risk. Too loud, too honest, too weird, too intense. But here's the truth. Every person who's ever made real change in the world, they were all of those things. But honest, different, unapologetic. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents wanted you to be. Not who your boss finds easiest to manage. Not even who your friends are most comfortable around. The raw, evolving, unfiltered version of you. That's where your power is. Not in the perfect image, but in the truth that lives underneath it." And Jung's entire philosophy? It revolved around something called individuation. It's the process of becoming whole, by integrating all parts of yourself, even the ones you've been told to hide. Especially those. Because let's be honest, wholeness is a whole lot more magnetic than perfection. Think about the people who've left the deepest impression on you. Were they the ones who had it all together? Or were they the ones who made you feel like it was okay not to? We remember the ones who were real. The ones who laughed loud. who cried without apology, who didn't edit themselves for the room. They stay with us not because they were flawless, but because they were honest, human, authentic. In a world drowning in fake, real is revolutionary. Socrates said the unexamined life isn't worth living. That means we have to ask the hard questions. Questions like, where am I pretending just to be accepted? If you sit with that long enough, you'll start noticing cracks. Little places where you've swapped truth for comfort. Those aren't flaws. They're invitations. Not to judge yourself, but to pay attention. Because that's where the masks live. And the moment you start peeling off those masks, something beautiful happens. You start to feel free. But here's the catch. They'll tell you being real is too much. Too emotional. Too quiet. Too intense. Too soft. But have you noticed something? Every version of too much is just code for hard to control. And that's the point. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about not being owned by anything outside of you. When you stop twisting yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone, that's when you reclaim your freedom. You start living from the inside out, not the outside in. Plato talked about shadows on a cave wall, false images that we mistake for reality. How many of us are still living in that cave? Mistaking the shadow version of ourselves, the one that looks good, sounds right, and fits in, for the real thing? But here's the truth. Authenticity isn't digestible. It's layered. It's challenging. And yes, it's so worth it. Because once you stop hiding, the right people start finding you. Not the ones who tolerate your light, but the ones who reflect it back. And the ones who don't get it? Let them go. Let them fall away without resistance. You were never meant to water yourself down just to be digestible. You were meant to be whole. You were never meant to be a version of yourself that fits into everyone else's expectations. You were meant to be fully expressed. Flaws, contradictions, emotions, and all. Not everyone will understand that. And that's okay. The goal isn't to be understood by everyone. It's to be understood by the ones who matter. You don't need a crowd of fans. You need a few real ones. The kind of people who don't just see you, but feel you. Who don't love you despite your truth, but because of it. So next time you catch yourself putting on a mask, just to keep the peace, just to avoid standing out, pause. Ask yourself one question. Is this really me? Or is this the version of me they'll accept? That single question can shift your entire life. Because here's the thing, self-respect doesn't start with boundaries. It starts with honesty. And the most important honesty? The kind you give to yourself. In the end, we won't be remembered for how many people liked us. We'll be remembered for the people who felt our presence. The ones who felt seen, heard, and safe around us because we dared to show up real. Let your presence be something they feel, not just something they look at. Let your authenticity speak louder than your appearance. Let your truth be the thing that makes you unforgettable. Now let's talk about growth, real growth. Most people say they want to grow, but very few understand what growth actually feels like. Because it's not a straight line. It's not glamorous. It's not always clear. And it's definitely not always comfortable. True growth doesn't always look like success. It often looks like shedding layers you once needed just to survive. It's choosing evolution, not to impress anyone else, not for applause, but because you're aligning more and more with who you really are. And let's be honest, some people mistake growth for performance. They change themselves to get validation. They shift their vibe to fit into the room. But fitting in? That's not the same as belonging. One changes your outfit. The other changes your life. Plato once said, the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. That's the core of true transformation. It's not about becoming something that gets attention. It's about becoming someone you're proud to be, especially when no one's watching. The Stoics had this figured out long before self-help books ever existed. Marcus Aurelius used to remind himself, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. No fluff. No performance. Just embodiment. For the Stoics, growth wasn't about stacking achievements. It was about building character. Becoming someone whose peace, whose focus, whose values couldn't be shaken by the noise of the world. While the rest of the world chases popularity, perfection, and performance, they chose to go inward. They focused on the invisible victories, the quiet wins, the kind of strength that can't be bought or borrowed. So what does it mean to grow in today's world? It doesn't mean abandoning who you are. It means refining who you are. You don't erase your essence, you expand it. You update it. Kind of like upgrading your phone. It still looks like your phone. Still functions like your phone. But now, it runs faster, smoother, smarter. That's how identity works too. You're not becoming someone else. You're removing the glitches. You're cleaning up the outdated programming. You're unlocking features you didn't even know were in you. You've always had the potential. Growth just brings it online. And if we go back to Jung again, he called this process individuation. Becoming whole. Not perfect, whole. And that means shedding the parts of you that were built on fear. The parts that people pleased. That hid from discomfort. That said yes when you meant no. Because not everything you picked up along the way was meant to stay. Some of your beliefs? They were survival tools. Some of your habits? They were shields. Some of your identities? They were strategies to feel accepted. And maybe they worked for a while. Maybe they kept you safe. But now, they're keeping you small. The moment you recognize that is the moment everything changes. That's when you start evolving on purpose. Not reactively. Not because life forced you to. But because you finally understand yourself enough to choose. Let's clear something up though. Choosing to grow doesn't mean you hate who you are now. It doesn't mean you reject your current self. It just means you respect yourself too much to stay stuck. A lot of people confuse that. They think if you want change, you must be unhappy. But real growth isn't about rejection. It's about reverence for who you've been. It's about loving yourself so much that you refuse to stay stagnant. You're not growing because you're not enough. You're growing because you already are. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And when you start examining yours, not with shame but with curiosity, you start to see patterns. You notice where you've evolved, where you're still stuck, where you've been compromising your truth just to fit in places you never even wanted to be. That awareness? That's power, because you can't change what you're not willing to face. But once you see it, really see it, you get your power back. You realize you don't need to ask for permission to become the next version of you. You just start. Quietly. Grounded. Intentionally. Let's be real, growth is messy. It's not all glow-ups and highlight reels. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's having to say goodbye to people who only liked the older, quieter version of you. But that's the price of peace. And you know what? It's worth it. You're not here to keep everyone comfortable. You're here to keep your soul awake. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Growth is the same. It's not a one-time decision, it's a lifestyle. A daily choice. To reflect instead of react. To pause instead of people please. To act from courage instead of comfort. You won't always get it right. But the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. You'll know you're evolving when your silence starts saying more than your explanations. Your peace becomes louder than your anxiety. The things that used to trigger you now teach you. And the people you used to chase? Now they're chasing clarity. Because when you become clear on who you are and where you're going, the energy shifts. People feel it. They feel your alignment. And they either rise with you or quietly fall away. Both outcomes are blessings. If you're sitting there wondering, is it time for me to change? This is your sign. You don't need to wait for a breakdown, a betrayal, or a rock-bottom moment to evolve. You don't need anyone to tell you it's okay. You're allowed to shift, to stretch, to step into the next chapter, even if the old one still lingers in your memory. You're allowed to let go of labels that no longer fit you. Because growth isn't betrayal, growth is truth. And when your growth is rooted in your values, not in fear, not in trying to impress or perform, it becomes something unshakable. Something no one can take from you. You don't grow to be loved. You grow because you already love yourself enough to move forward. And that's what makes you unforgettable. Not the version of you that stayed quiet, safe, and small for acceptance, but the version that kept evolving, kept becoming, even when no one else understood. Here's the thing. We've been sold this illusion that to be lovable, respectable, or worth remembering, we have to be flawless. We're taught to sand down the rough edges, erase the parts of our past we're ashamed of, and present this airbrushed version of ourselves to the world. But no one connects with perfection. People don't bond over the highlight reel. They bond over the pain, over the shared struggle, over the messy, unfiltered moments where you said, "This is hard," and kept going anyway. That's where connection lives. That's where impact lives. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But let's be honest, real self-knowledge doesn't come from flexing your strengths. It comes from owning your shadows. It comes from looking at your flaws, your regrets, your heartbreaks, and saying, "Yeah, that's part of me. And I'm not ashamed of it anymore." Because shame only holds power when you hide. The second you bring those hidden parts into the light, they lose their grip. They stop controlling you, and you start to take your power back. Carl Jung said it best, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." So maybe that thing you've been hiding, the part of your story you've buried out of fear or embarrassment, isn't your weakness at all. Maybe it's your superpower. That one thing you think makes you too different. The emotion you were told is too much. The part of you that feels too complicated. That might actually be the most unforgettable part of your story. The very thing that could help someone else feel seen, or heard, or less alone. But if you keep it hidden, out of fear, out of habit, you rob yourself of your own authenticity. And worse, you rob the world of what makes you unique. We all have scars. Emotional scars. Mental scars. Sometimes even physical ones. And society? It's been trying to sell us cover up for decades. Cover up your pain, your sensitivity, your story. But here's the truth. Those scars? They're not a weakness. They're proof that you lived, that you fought, that you healed, that you kept showing up even when it hurt. And that kind of resilience? That's magnetic. People don't remember the one who never cracked. They remember the one who cracked but didn't collapse. Let's bring in the Stoics again for a second. Epictetus, one of the greats, taught that it's not what happens to you that defines you, but how you respond to it. So yeah, your mistakes? They're not your identity. Your failures? Not your worth. It's your response to them that tells the story. That's your character. That's your presence. And let's be honest, stories don't move people when everything goes right. They move people when things fall apart, and the protagonist keeps going anyway. Socrates said, "Be as you wish to seem." Not be perfect. Not be untouchable. Just be real. People aren't looking for flawless idols. They're looking for evidence that being human doesn't make them broken. When you show up in your truth, flaws, emotions, and all, you become a mirror. A reflection of what's possible when someone stops trying to be everything to everyone and just starts being real. So take a second and ask yourself, what's one thing you've been hiding? One chapter in your life you've been afraid to share because you're scared of how people might see you? What if that's the very thing that makes you unforgettable? What if what you thought disqualified you is actually your most powerful asset? Plato believed that truth isn't just something external, it's deeply internal. It's something we live, something we embody. And what greater truth is there than this? Yes, I've struggled. Yes, I've made mistakes. And yes, I'm still here. That's not weakness. That's a declaration. That's what it means to stand in your full humanity and refuse to shrink for someone else's comfort. The world doesn't need another filtered personality. It needs realness. It needs people who've walked through the fire and didn't let it turn them bitter. People who still care deeply, even after being hurt. People who show up fully, even when it's terrifying. Because that kind of presence, that kind of energy, that's what lingers. That's what people remember. You don't need to apologize for the old version of yourself. They were doing the best they could with what they knew. You honor that version, not by erasing them, but by growing from them. By becoming wiser, stronger, truer. Your growth isn't about forgetting who you were. It's about owning it so completely that no one can use it against you. So if you've got flaws, welcome to the club. You're not broken. You're just real. And real people? They don't need to be perfect. They just need to be honest, resilient, willing to show up, even if they're still healing. There's a quiet desperation a lot of people carry, and most don't even realize it. It's this deep craving, not just to be seen, but to be picked, to be validated, to feel like we finally belong somewhere. And it starts young, right? We're trained to raise our hands and wait to be called on. We're praised for being agreeable, easygoing, non-confrontational. We're taught, subtly and repeatedly, that if we're low maintenance, we'll be loved. But here's what no one tells you. The more you try to be chosen, the less you feel like you belong. Because being chosen puts all the power in someone else's hands. It says, I need you to recognize my worth before I can believe in it myself. That's not power. That's permission-seeking dressed as love. But there's a shift, a simple but radical shift, that changes everything. Stop waiting to be picked. Start deciding who earns access. When you do that, it's not about arrogance. It's about alignment. You stop shrinking to fit into someone else's world and start standing tall in your own. You start asking better questions, not, do they like me? But, do they align with the version of me I'm becoming? Not the version that's desperate for approval. Not the one that shapeshifts to survive. But the one that's grounded, evolving, choosing peace over chaos. There's this quote from Seneca, one of the great Stoic minds, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. And part of learning how to live is learning how to stop begging for belonging. You weren't born to audition for connection. You're not a product trying to make a sale. You're a human being, full, flawed, feeling, and the people who are meant for you, they'll feel your energy. They'll recognize it, not just as valuable but as rare. Carl Jung once said that people project their unmet needs and hidden insecurities onto others. So if someone makes you feel like you have to perform or prove your worth just to be loved, that's not your reflection. That's their emptiness, their fear, their inability to see worth without control. And that's not your lesson to carry. Your lesson is this: you are the chooser. Your life is your space. Your energy is your currency. And not everyone gets unlimited access just because they smile or show up. Think about how different your relationships would look if, instead of constantly asking, am I enough for them, you started asking, are they right for me? Are they honest? Are they consistent? Do they hold space for the real me, or just the version of me that's convenient for them? That question, that standard, it changes everything. Because suddenly, your life isn't about chasing validation. It's about guarding alignment. And here's the magic that happens when you stop chasing approval. People feel it. They feel your self-respect. They feel your boundaries. They feel your calm. There's a confidence that doesn't have to be loud. A kind of quiet power that says, I know who I am. I know what I bring. I know what I'm not available for anymore. And when you carry that energy, not from ego, but from clarity, people either rise to meet it or fade out. Either way, you win. Let's bring in Plato here for a moment. He said, the measure of a man is what he does with power. But let's redefine power. Not power over others, but personal power, grounded power, the kind that doesn't need to impress, the kind that holds standards, the kind that knows love, attention, and intimacy aren't things to beg for. They're things to welcome when they come from the right place. You don't have to give access to everyone. You get to choose who steps closer, who stays at the gate. Not to play games, but to protect your peace. And let's not downplay it. Peace is expensive. You fought hard for it. Don't give it away for cheap. There's a version of you that doesn't need to prove anything. That doesn't twist into shapes to keep others happy. That doesn't bend every time someone asks for more than they give. That version of you? That's the version people can't forget. Not because you were the loudest. Not because you were the most likable. But because you were whole, and you didn't hand out pieces of yourself just to be accepted. That's what makes you unforgettable. Socrates taught that the secret to change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So build this version of you. The one who no longer shrinks to fit into someone else's comfort zone. The one who no longer waits for permission to speak truth, to take up space, to shine. Because here's the truth. The right people will never ask you to shrink. And the wrong ones? Let them go. You don't need their validation to be powerful. You just need your own. And let's be honest, so much of the messaging we grow up with is designed to keep us small. Be chill. Don't care too much. Don't feel too deeply. Don't make waves. But real connection doesn't come from being neutral. It doesn't come from being easy to digest. It comes from depth, from passion, from presence. So if you've ever been told you're too much, too emotional, too intense, too sensitive, let me be really clear. That's not a flaw. That's a gift. You feel deeply because you care. You speak passionately because you're alive. You're not too much, you're just not easy to ignore. Carl Jung believed the emotional world isn't something to repress. It's something to integrate. He said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. That intensity you carry? It's not there to break you. It's there to wake you. To remind you that surface-level living will never fulfill you. So the next time someone says, you're too much, smile. Look them in the eye. And say, then go find less. Because you're not here to shrink. You're here to expand into the full truth of who you are. The people who are meant for you, they won't flinch from that. They'll rise to meet it. They'll celebrate it. Because people who feel deeply, love deeply. And people who love deeply, they change lives. There's a quiet kind of strength that starts to show up the moment someone realizes they deserve more. Not in a loud or arrogant way, but in that calm, steady presence that says, I'm not settling anymore. And once that switch flips, the old patterns stop. The one-sided relationships, the exhausting conversations, the constant need to prove your value, they don't make sense anymore. Not because the world changed, but because you did. When you finally know what you're worth, the begging ends. The chasing ends. You're no longer searching for scraps of love or fragments of attention. You're holding out for something real. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, said, never value anything as profitable to yourself which shall compel you to break your promise, to lose your self-respect, or to hate any man. In other words, if keeping someone means betraying yourself, it's already too expensive. And the people who understand that, the ones who walk away without burning down the room, they're dangerous, in the best possible way. Because they can't be manipulated. They can't be guilt. They won't stay where their peace is being broken. Here's a truth that's hard for some to face. Most people aren't afraid of losing someone who needs them. They're afraid of losing someone who doesn't, but still chose them. That's the difference. Because when someone knows what lifts their energy and what drains it, they stop making choices from loneliness. They start making them from clarity. And that kind of clarity? It's rare. It's magnetic. It's powerful. That's what makes people want to earn a place in your life instead of assuming they'll always have one. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But the moment you do, that's the moment you stop needing anyone else to do it for you. You're no longer performing for love. You're living in it, owning it, becoming it. And when you show up that way, grounded, self-respecting, unwilling to play small, that version of you, that's the one people don't want to lose. Because that kind of presence, It's rare. It's stabilizing. It's real. Let's talk about boundaries for a second, because a lot of people confuse boundaries with walls. But they're not the same. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about letting the right people in. They say, here's what I allow. Here's what I won't. Not because I'm cold, but because I'm clear. And that clarity? That's what protects your peace. That's what keeps you from constantly being in emotional repair mode, trying to recover from things that should have never gotten through your door in the first place. Socrates said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." So maybe instead of trying to fix the people who don't know how to value you, it's time to build a new standard. A new way of showing up that doesn't bend every time someone else feels uncomfortable. Because peace that costs you your self-worth? That's not peace. That's disguised self-abandonment. And here's something a lot of people miss. Knowing what you deserve doesn't mean you think you're better than anyone. It just means you've finally decided you're not less. And that decision? It changes everything. It changes the way you speak, the way you love, the way you choose. You stop accepting half effort, half truth, half presence. You don't demand perfection, but you do require consistency. You're not chasing fairy tales, but you are chasing honesty. You stop asking, am I asking for too much? And you start asking, why was I settling for so little? Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. So let self-respect become your habit. Let saying no when something feels off become natural. Let choosing peace over popularity become your default move. Because here's what happens when you get clear. The wrong people fall away, and the right ones? They rise. Let's get even more honest. There's a kind of love that feels like pressure. Like wait, the kind that whispers, don't leave me. I need you to be okay. It's not always ill-intentioned, but it's heavy. Because love that comes from emptiness? It's not really love, it's survival. It's a transaction, a silent plea for rescue. And when love becomes about need, it exhausts everyone involved. But once you accept yourself fully, without conditions, your love stops being something you need to survive. It becomes something you choose to give. You're not handing people your broken pieces, hoping they'll glue you back together. You're whole. And from that wholeness, you give. And that kind of love? It's not needy. It's not clingy. It's light. It uplifts instead of overwhelms. It holds space instead of taking it. A lot of people confuse intensity with love. They think that clinging means connection. That obsession equals loyalty. But real connection doesn't come from fear of losing someone. It comes from the freedom to choose them over and over again, without fear, without performance, without control. And that kind of love? It's rare. Because it's not about possession. It's about presence. It says, I'm here. Not because I'll fall apart without you, but because I want to be. The Stoics taught this too. They said our peace should never be at the mercy of things we can't control. Epictetus reminded us, only the educated are free. In this case, that means emotionally educated, free from the need to be validated just to feel worthy, free from giving love just to get it back. When you've done the inner work, when you've filled your own cup, you don't chase love anymore. You radiate it. And radiance? That's unforgettable. When someone walks into a room with calm confidence, when their joy doesn't depend on anyone else, when they don't need your attention, but still value your connection, that's a rare frequency. People don't want to lose that. Not because it feeds their ego, but because it awakens something real. You don't get that energy from someone who's emotionally starving. You get it from someone who knows they're already full. And anything they give you? It's a gift, not a cry for help. Socrates once said, the hottest love has the coldest end. And it's true, because love born from fear, from obsession, from emotional scarcity, it burns fast. But it also burns out. That's the kind of love that clings, demands, and eventually collapses under its own weight. It's not sustainable because it's built on needing someone else to fill a void that only you can fill. But love that comes from fullness, that love breathes, it expands, it evolves. It's not anxious, it's anchored. It's not desperate, it's deliberate. It's the kind of love that says, I'm already whole. I've built a life I'm proud of. I've made peace with myself. And now, I get to share it with someone who adds, not completes. This is why it's so important, so vital, to fill your own cup first. Not later. Not when you meet the right person. Not once you feel more confident. Because if your cup is empty, you'll find yourself draining every relationship, searching for something that no one else can give you. But if your cup is full, if you've spent time healing, growing, building your foundation, then everything you give comes from overflow. And the right people? They won't take advantage of that abundance. They'll honor it. They'll match it. They'll protect it. Aristotle believed that the highest form of love wasn't romantic, it was philia, virtuous friendship, a connection between two people who are committed to goodness, who challenge each other to become more of who they really are, not less. That kind of love? It doesn't ask you to hide your emotions. It doesn't pressure you to always be easy. It strengthens you. It sees your full spectrum and still stays. But here's the catch. You only get that kind of love when you've become whole before it arrives. So ask yourself honestly, am I offering love from a wound or from wisdom? Am I offering my heart because I'm afraid to be alone or because I've made peace with myself first? Because love, real love, should never feel like a lifeline. It should feel like light. And here's the truth, you don't need someone to complete you. That's the old narrative. You need someone who complements the wholeness you've already fought hard to earn. That kind of connection? It's sacred. That's the presence people fear losing. Not because you make them feel needed, but because you make them feel seen. And even more importantly, you see yourself. The most unforgettable energy you will ever carry is that quiet knowing that you are already whole. That you don't need to prove, perform, or chase. When you choose yourself first, fully, unapologetically, the right people will never ask you to shrink. They'll rise with you. They'll expand beside you. They'll build with you. And the rest? Let them fall away. If what you've just heard stirred something inside you, then trust that. That pull you feel right now? That quiet voice saying, there's more in me than I've been showing? That's not noise. That's your truth. That's your power waking up. This world doesn't need more perfection. It doesn't need more people playing it safe. It needs people willing to tell the truth about what it took to heal. It needs people who are done performing and ready to live. So let your journey be messy. Let your growth be nonlinear. Let your heart stay open, even after it's been bruised. Let your peace become the new standard. And when someone asks why you're not chasing anymore, why you seem more grounded, more intentional, more clear, just smile and say, because I finally chose me. There's this idea that choosing yourself means you're selfish, that you're shutting people out. But it's the opposite. Choosing yourself means you finally know what you're offering. You know what it costs to give your time, your energy, your heart. And you're no longer handing those things out like freebies to people who haven't earned them. That's not ego. That's discernment. And that kind of clarity? That's what shifts everything. So stop giving unlimited access to people who only show up when it's convenient. Stop trying to convince anyone to value you. That's not your job. Your job is to value yourself so deeply that anyone who wants to be close to you rises to meet that standard or steps back without resentment. Because you don't owe everyone access. You owe yourself alignment. Here's what happens when you start living this way. People feel your presence. It's not loud. It's not forceful. But it's unmistakable. Because you're not performing anymore. You're not pretending anymore. You're just being. And that kind of energy? That's the kind of energy people remember. They don't remember how flawless you looked. They remember how they felt around you. Grounded. Because you gave them permission to be real. Simply by being real yourself. So breathe. Let this version of you settle in. The one who's done shrinking. The one who's learning to rest, not quit. The one who honors every scar as a chapter, not a flaw. Because that version of you, that's the one no one can replace. There's this unspoken pressure we all feel at some point. Don't feel too much. Don't care too loudly. Don't speak too passionately. Be chill. Be agreeable. Be low maintenance. And over time, those messages start to work. Not because they're true, but because they're familiar. Because we're scared of being too much. We're scared that if we really showed up in our fullness, if we really let people see us, they'd leave. But here's the truth. You were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who were too limited to hold you. And that's not your fault. If you've ever been told you're too emotional, too intense, too sensitive, or too complicated, I want you to hear this clearly. That's not a flaw. That's your edge. That's what sets you apart in a world of surface-level conversations and filtered emotions. You feel deeply because you're awake. You express passionately because you care. You ask more of the world because you expect more from yourself. You're not too much. You're just not easy to forget. Carl Jung believed that our emotional world wasn't something to repress, but something to integrate. He said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And you? Your depth? Your fire? That's not a liability. It's your inner compass. It's the part of you that won't let life stay small. That demands meaning. That demands truth. Yes, your intensity may make others uncomfortable, but that says more about their limits than your light. The truth is, your passion will make people question their apathy. Your empathy will make them confront their numbness. And your honesty will challenge their facades. Some will call it too much. But the ones who are meant for you, they'll call it home. Let's bring in the Stoics one last time. People think Stoicism means suppressing emotion. But real Stoicism was never about denial, it was about direction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That includes your emotional life. It's not about silencing what you feel. It's about owning it, channeling it, using it, not as a crutch, but as a compass. So no, you don't need to tone yourself down. You just need to trust your fire. Let your emotions inform you, not control you. That's what makes you emotionally intelligent. That's what makes you magnetic. Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." And knowing yourself? It means knowing your emotional range and not apologizing for it. It means honoring your sensitivity, not hiding it. It means recognizing that your ability to feel is the same thing that allows you to connect, to heal, to lead, to create, to love. That's not weakness. That's power. You've got this ability to walk into a room and feel what others won't say. To sense what's beneath the surface. To ask better questions. To sit in discomfort while others run from it. That's your superpower. And yes, it may scare some people. But that's okay. Because not everyone is ready for your truth. The right ones won't just stay, they'll rise to meet it. So the next time someone tries to dim your light, don't shrink, smile, and say, then go find less. Because you weren't meant to dilute yourself just to make others more comfortable. You were meant to amplify. You were meant to expand. You were meant to feel deeply, love fully, and live truthfully. And the people who are truly aligned with you, they'll never try to shrink you. They'll celebrate you. They'll match you. They'll grow with you. There's a kind of presence that enters a room and changes the energy without needing to say a word. It's not about loudness. It's about clarity. About the self-respect you carry in your silence. About the boundaries you honor without ever raising your voice. That's the presence people can't forget. That's the energy they're drawn to, not because it demands attention, but because it commands respect. When you stop performing, people feel it. When you stop chasing, people notice. When you stop apologizing for who you are, something in the world adjusts to honor that. And here's the wild thing. You don't need everyone to get it. You don't need the crowd. You just need a few people who see the real you and love you because of it, not in spite of it. The rest? Let them go. You're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to be you. So from now on, stop measuring your value by how many people want you. Start measuring it by how true you are to yourself. Build a life around your truth. Choose peace over popularity. Choose clarity over chaos. Choose evolution over performance. Because when you show up like that, people feel it. More importantly, you feel it. You walk different. You speak different. You choose different. And you stop needing to be chosen because you already are. By you. Let this be the standard now. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't shrink. You radiate. You choose yourself every day, and the ones who matter? They rise to meet that standard. That's the kind of presence that echoes. That's the kind of truth that lasts. That's what makes you unforgettable. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't let it stop here. There's another video waiting right now on the screen that will take you even deeper. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you for being here. For being part of this space. For choosing to grow. This isn't just about philosophy. It's about becoming. Slowly. Intentionally. Powerfully. And remember, the journey continues. We'll be right here when you're ready for the next step.